Welcome back, everybody. And this is Deborah Stewart, Director of Supplier Diversity for Shell, and we are here live once again at the National Minority Supplier Development Council's annual conference and business fair. And we're moving into our last podcast topic, which I think will be a fascinating one and hopefully an inspirational one for many MBEs out there. And the topic is building diverse suppliers through mergers and acquisitions. And I have two great guests who are joining me here today to shed some wisdom and some light and some information on this topic. We have Bill Ellison of Cadiz Capital and Mark Harrison of Totem Enterprise Group. And welcome to you both. Thank you all so much for joining us. So what I would like to do to start things off basically is just ask you both to introduce yourselves and introduce your companies so that our podcast listeners can find out a little bit about what you do and what your background is, and we'll take our conversation from there.
Very good.
So, Bill, you want to start us off?
I'm Bill Ellison with Cadiz Capital out of St. Louis, Missouri. We're an MBA company, and we do MBE, mergers and acquisitions. We buy companies of large sizes, something unique for the minority community. Matter of fact, we consider this to be the last frontier for minorities in the sense that if they endeavor to grow, they can grow by acquisition or purchasing companies or division. Some of the major corporations are now spinning off some of their smaller division, and they're refocusing themselves, and we're now in a position that we can acquire this. And we're suggesting to other minorities to look at the opportunity. Right now, we've looked at several large acquisitions. One was with Procter & Gamble, as I mentioned to you earlier, $3.1 billion that we were able to put together. And there are other opportunities out there, and we'd like to encourage more minority to participate in this aspect.
My name is Mark Harrison. I'm with Totem Enterprise Group, which is a small advisory firm working with minority and women-owned companies in raising capital as well as strategic relationships and acquisitions, so M&A, joint ventures, etc. I'm based in Washington, D.C. My website is totem, E as in enterprise, G as in group.com. You can find out more about my background. Thank you.
I was going to ask you a little bit, Mark, tell us your role prior to this. You were the head of the Business Consortium Forum for NMSDC, and a little bit more?
Before this, I was the president of the Business Consortium Fund, which is an affiliated nonprofit with the NMSDC, and basically it provides financing for minority-owned businesses that are certified by NMSDC. So once you get a contract, you can come to BCF and get financing. We also provided advisory services as well, and educational and training.
So just in case there are any of you who are not aware that there is such a thing as a Business Consortium Fund, that's an important piece of information and potential resource for MBEs as well through NMSDC. So Bill, tell us a little bit more about your background as well. We're reading some of your press clippings, and we know you have a deep background as a business leader.
Well, interesting enough, many years ago, a friend of mine that happened to be in the Office of Applied Business was running or president of a $3 million company, and he called me up on a Sunday evening and said, "Bill, I don't know what I'm going to do. The family is going to sell this company," and I told him we're going to buy the company, and that's what we did. We organized the money to buy the company. We ran the company for about 4 years, and we sold off the pieces.
And what was the name of the company?
That was called a TAPCO out of St. Louis, Missouri, making business product, 3-ring binders. But my background in manufacturing and acquisition started long before that. And what was interesting, many years I've seen different types of business come on the market, and it seems like the person's at the right place, with the right plan and with capital, they can acquire it. And that's what we're trying to encourage more minorities to do. All they have to do is do research. You got to be aware of what's going on. You have to know the answer, and you must put a firm plan in place that makes sense. If you do that, and if you surround yourself with good people, you can accomplish acquisition, mergers. Yes.
Very good. So my first question, why should MWBEs consider M&A? And what other strategies are available for growth?
Well, they need to pursue M&A in order to grow their business at a quicker rate. You can always grow organically, but M&A allows you to grow much quicker. And just as important is to increase the value of your business. This is partially about not just growing a business, but wealth creation for minority entrepreneurs. So M&A allows you to increase the value of your business as your business gets larger. So it's a very important topic, as Bill mentioned.
I echo that thought. You know, you can grow a business organic, slowly, or you can acquire another business similar to yours or the exact type of business and grow it much faster. And that's what you were mentioning. And that's what we recommend.
So I'm thinking about self-assessment. So I'm an MBE. Let's just say I'm an MBE. At what point, let's say my business is 3 years old, I'm doing pretty well. At what point should I begin thinking about M&A as a growth strategy? What should I be thinking about in terms of evaluating my business capabilities today, evaluating my capabilities as a leader for those to consider M&A and growth that way? What factors should we have in mind?
That's a very good question. I'm glad you asked that question. You know, it should be a part of your original plan. If you're going to grow your business, you should say, in what way should I grow this business? How can I grow this business? M&A certainly allow you to double the growth of the business. So what we recommend, it can be a part of your plan. You can select when you're going to execute that part of your plan. But have it as a part of the plan going forward that you can see how you can acquire somebody else, much smaller, with the same product line or your size or larger. The interesting thing about M&A now, there are a lot of small companies that are acquiring large companies. You may be aware of what happened to American Airlines. U.S. Air acquired American Airlines. American Airlines, before they went into bankrupt, was much larger, 3 times as large as U.S. Air. So minorities can use that to their advantage. But they must study, they must understand, they must have a business plan, and they must have good people around them that will advise them on how to do this.
That's absolutely true, but to get to your point as to when the individual is ready, you have to be true to yourself. You know, not all entrepreneurs want to scale their business the way that M&A allows you to do that. So you have to be honest with yourself that, do I want to really take my business to the $100 million level, $500 million, $1 billion level? If that's something you want to do, then this is a good strategy for you to pursue. But if you're comfortable at a smaller level, then be honest with yourself, because chances are you're going to have to take some outside funding to do that. And once you do that, there are responsibilities and obligations that come along with that don't necessarily jive up with you running a more non-aggressive business plan. So be true to yourself.
Yeah. So for those, again, the entrepreneurs out there who maybe the M&A has sort of started crossing their minds, you mentioned there are obligations and responsibilities that come with outside funding. Can you all talk a little bit about what examples of what some of those things look like?
Well, it's how you structure a deal. I'll never forget what an old gentleman told me one time. He said, you can pay back $1 billion if you're allowed to pay $100 a year. That's true. But you have to structure the deal that makes sense. So when you look at what is the cash flow, what is going to support the underlining of paying the debt, how can I do this, and what time frame, and what kind of return can I get on my capital? All of these are very important. So we suggest you do your homework, understand what you're doing. Don't go in it blindly. But if you do so, you will certainly reap a lot of rewards, as you said earlier. Yes.
So you should have a plan, and you should understand that, how much of a company can I buy? And you should work with your professionals, your lawyers, your M&A advisors, to determine how much money can you spend to acquire a company. What resources are you bringing to the table? How much cash do you have in reserve in order to buy that company? Because if you don't, then you have to go out and find outside sources of capital. And in terms of some of the obligations that come into place, so if it's a bank or a mezzanine lender or subordinated debt lender, they may have certain covenants in the loan document that make you have to execute certain ways. You know, you just can't buy a company that's in business A, then all of a sudden the next day say, oh, I want to do company Z. You know, there are restrictive covenants that say, no, you have to stay in business A and grow that business and expound on that. And the same thing with people who contribute, not contribute, but who invest equity dollars. You know, they're going to want to be on their board of directors. They want to have some input into how your company grows. So these are the things you have to think about as an entrepreneur. Do I want this type of outside assistance to help you grow your company? And it is assistance. It is assistance. You know, most of these folks are very good at what they do, and they can help the entrepreneur grow that company. They might have strengths that entrepreneur doesn't have. So it's don't think of it as kind of interference. These people, you all have the same goal, is to grow the company. So people should embrace that.
An entrepreneur must understand that he can have 100% of a company, his. But once he starts growing it, he's going to have to give up something, ownership or something, to grow the company. There's nothing wrong in giving up ownership. You always want to hold on to 51%, or you want to claw back, or you want a way of buying your partners out. But when you do that, that's going to take capital. So you want to structure from day one what you see is going to happen in the future and how you're going to strategize to get to that end. If you fully include in your mind what you're going to do, how you're going to accomplish, then you can have a path to success. As was mentioned, you're going to have partners. And either you're going to take the partners out because they're looking for a return on their investment, either buy them out or take them out by some other means, but that you're going to have partners as long as you're growing that business. Once you get to the business where you want it, then that's when you can really enjoy it. But there's nothing wrong in owning 51% of a company. There's nothing wrong in owning 40 or 20% of a company. It depends on what size the pie is.
Okay. I did want to mention also that the NMSDC has a special certification so that the minority entrepreneur does not have to own 51%. They can actually go below 51% ownership. It's called the Growth Initiative by NMSDC. So you are certified as a minority-controlled company. So you can actually go down to 30% of the equity. That's as low as you can go, as long as you maintain voting control. And you control day-to-day operations and a number of other things. I invite people to go to the NMSDC website to see all the requirements there. But if you're thinking I can't grow because I need to bring in outside capital, and if that outside capital is not minority capital, then I'm in danger of losing my certification. There is that option for NMSDC available to you.
Yes.
That's good to know. I did not know that.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. So, as I understand that you have been involved, Mark, that you've been working with Marcus on the approach, if you will, for encouraging and providing resources, for NMSDC's approach for encouraging and providing resources for suppliers in terms of acquisitions, succession planning, so forth and so on. You want to talk a little bit about that?
I've been working with them on kind of two separate things. First is an NMSDC initiative, which is a financial matchmaking. It's often the case that entrepreneurs that are searching for capital often spend a lot of time going to different places and getting turned down. And it's a very frustrating process. What we're endeavoring to do is to try to come up with some metrics so that there's a higher probability by the funding source and the MBE that financing can occur. So therefore cutting back on the time that the MBE spends on trying to access the capital. So, but it's primarily at this point, primarily debt we're looking at. So it'll be from banks, it might be from community development financing institutions, CDFIs, SBA lenders, private lenders, whatever the case may be. But the point is to make the process more efficient so that there's a matching going on. The other program I've been talking with Marcus and NMSDC about is something that I've developed called the Corporate Asset Divestiture Clearinghouse Program. And what this is doing is we want to work with large corporations that, as you mentioned earlier, divest of assets all the time, particularly smaller assets. Large assets like your $3.1 billion, there's a process involved, there's an investment banker, but there are tons of assets that are sold constantly by large corporations that don't get that kind of notoriety and publicity, particularly among MBEs and WBEs. So what this portal does is it allows corporations to list those assets anonymously and gives MBEs and WBEs the opportunity to look at the information there, and if they're interested, actually submit a bid to purchase those assets. And again, it allows the corporation to then anonymously evaluate those bids. Because what the corporation doesn't want, they don't want 100 people calling them, asking them information, particularly about an asset that might be small. So they have the opportunity to evaluate the bid, and then, but the key thing is that, we're getting diverse suppliers into the mix, where they usually don't have access to this information, to these transactions. And the other thing is that it doesn't defeat the corporate purpose of the divestiture. The corporation wants to sell, particularly for a small asset, they want to sell the asset, they want to move it fast, and they want to get best price for it. So giving MBEs and WBEs the opportunity to take a look and see if they are interested in purchasing that is consistent with the corporation's interest in selling the asset quickly. So these two, I'm very excited about this program. I'm very excited about both programs. I think they really will move MBE development along the way.
One other interesting thing about MBEs, they must remember that when they sign a confidentiality agreement, they must stick to it. The only thing you have is your name and your word. And in this industry, if you damage either one, people really look at it wrong. So we want to make sure that you think about what you're signing, make sure you agree with it, and once you sign it, do not reveal confidential information. You don't want that to happen.
Yes. I know very often in these processes, one of the first things that happens is that a company who's trying to divest something asks the potential buyers to sign a confidentiality agreement. Yeah.
And these are types of process issues that your advisor can help you with. So that's why it's important if MBEs are thinking about an acquisition is the way I want to go to try to grow my business. To me it's important that you start to kind of develop a team. Build your team to get ready to do that. Before you start looking at companies, have your transactional lawyer, have an M&A advisor, whether it be an investment bank or a fund. Some funds have advisory capabilities. Have someone who can give you kind of the ins and outs, professional folks who can give you the ins and outs of how to go about doing this acquisition. Because better preparation leads to better outcomes. I can guarantee you that.
And are there MBEs that can be part of that team?
Yes, they are.
Yeah. You can build your team, build your advisory team with other MBEs. Yeah.
In terms of investment banks, for example, there's Loop Capital, that's in Chicago. Williams Capital is in New York. Castle Oak, I believe, is in New York. In terms of funders, there's a lot of them. You could go to the National Association of Investment Company website. There's a list of various different funds that provide capital for folks.
You got to think that all lawyers do not understand acquisition.
Right.
We have a law firm out of New York we use. So you got to get a law firm that understands acquisitions if that's what you're going to do.
Absolutely.
Because if you don't, you can lose a lot of time, energy, and effort.
It's not the guy who maybe incorporated your business and who's really a real estate attorney who's been with you for a long time. Now you really need professional assistance to help you move through this process and be successful.
So as you think about the other thing that we touched with Marcus about was succession planning. And I remember mentioning that we've added about $150 million worth of new spend in our supply chain with growing suppliers, capacity building, suppliers who have increased their capabilities to compete and have gained new business with Shell. But we've also lost at least that much with suppliers who have sold their businesses or passed them on to heirs who were not minorities or women. So as you think about succession planning and the opportunities for MBEs, to buy businesses from other MBEs. Is that something that you all are involved in?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of businesses out there. When individuals get to a certain age, they may be looking for retirement. They may recognize they can no longer go the step that they have been going. This is the time to put a succession plan in. And there are a lot of MBEs that are buying MBEs, and the company remain a minority-owned company. But like you said, it has to be planned. It's not something that can happen all of a sudden. And families have to consider this before that time.
It's important that you kind of think about this in advance. You know, you don't want to, you know, it's often the case you kind of learn of an opportunity all of a sudden, and that happens. But to the extent that you can begin to plan, you know what companies are in your space or in related spaces, you know, those are kind of automatic targets. Whether or not they're for sale, you know, if I'm in this business and someone's doing something complementary to me, you know that's a potential partner or an acquisition that I might make. So you strike a relationship with that company. And again, it's not to necessarily outright buy their business, even though you might want to do that at some point. But in case something does happen, a change of a lifestyle change, you know, a retirement, a divorce, a death, disability, that person, you know, you're there, you have an established relationship to be able to talk to the owner about possibly taking over that business.
I'm in the process right now of finishing a book that all the experiences that I've had in life, I would like to pass it on to the next generation. Maybe they can benefit somehow from what I've benefited. And the interesting thing is the title of the book, How Not to Succeed by Trying. It's almost like hitting that glass ceiling, that steel ceiling, but you got to keep at it. But I think the next generation can benefit from the experience that older people have had. You notice I said older. I'm still 26, but yes.
Older. You know,
Yes.
Mark, as you were describing the efforts that you're working on within MSDC, one of the things that just keeps coming back to me is the word access. Access to information, access to opportunities. Just being in the right place at the right time, just to find out what's going on. I think that is, and what the opportunities look like. I think that is still so much the key to diversity and inclusion work of all types, and especially for entrepreneurship. Just being able to find a way to open up access for suppliers to find out about opportunities and get support in assessing whether they are ready, able, willing to go for those opportunities. I think the other thing that really struck me when you were talking about acquisition is the idea that not everybody is there. Not everyone is interested in growing their businesses that way. Not everyone is interested in moving from a $10 million to a $500 million company. That takes a lot.
No,
it's not an indictment. It's not an indictment. It's a very legitimate decision that every individual business owner has absolutely the right to make. So one of the things when we are looking for capacity building candidates, and we're looking for companies who they may be a few $1 million now, but we have opportunities coming down the road in Shell that says, hey, you know, there's about $50 million worth of opportunity coming down in this area over the next 5 years. And, you know, we've got a couple of MBEs in the space. They're not ready for $50 million now. What would it take for them to get ready for $50 million? That's one question. But the second question is, are they really interested? Are they interested in making that the kind of change and taking on the kind of challenge that it would take to do that?
And I think those are legitimate questions to be asked for people to make a decision on. Yes.
Yeah, and it's a personal decision that every business owner has the right to make. But it's also incumbent on us just to be clear with suppliers that that's what we're looking for. When we say capacity building, we're looking for people who are willing to make kind of a joint investment, because we're going to put in time and energy, and we're going to ask our partners like NMSDC and HMSDC to put in time and energy working to help companies figure out what it takes to grow and compete, and we need to be really clear that the company is interested.
Entrepreneurs should understand that there are different skill sets as your company grows. So the skill set that you need to start your company and when it's at an early stage changes as your company grows. You need more, quote, professional management as your company gets larger and larger and larger. And there's nothing wrong with you deferring or bringing in, as the founder of the company, you bring in talented folks around you to help grow your business. Maybe you're good managing your company up to $50 million. But if you're talking about a $200 million, $250 million, or $1 billion company, maybe that's not your skill set, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, that's what we call team building. You build a team, and as you grow, that team may change, but you bring in more key professional people that can handle responsibility. One individual can never handle all the duties and responsibility, but if you bring in the right talent, that can grow the company.
Yeah.
So that's correct in what you said, yes.
And for the long term, if I'm thinking beyond my generation, beyond my kids' generation, beyond my grandkids' generation, for the building of wealth and for building the next company that starts as an MBE, but in 100 years is a shell. That's what it's going to take. It's that willingness to say, okay, now I got a plan for the next generation. I got a plan for expanding this business tenfold, not twofold, or 100-fold.
Yes.
And that's a different animal.
That's what we need to do as minorities, is to build wealth. And I've already started planning and passing the torch on to my son. So the little bit of knowledge I have with all the knowledge he thinks he has should go a long ways.
Your son here somewhere?
No. He's an executive somewhere now. I'll tell you an interesting story about my son. He took the IBM, I think it was not the IBM, but one of the Google, one of their exams. And he aced it without studying. I said, son, you think I could take it? He said, Daddy, don't try. So it's a new generation that's coming.
Yeah, for long-term wealth building, I would love to see our MBEs begin to think multi-generationally in about what it takes to be 10 times bigger,
yes,
and 100 times bigger.
We can go there. We can go there.
And because that's what it's going to take to get the kind of spend with a shell.
But see, it's a mindset.
That's going to be big.
But it has to be a mindset.
Chains condense and get smaller.
Yes.
You've got bigger and bigger opportunities. So you need bigger and bigger companies to be able to take advantage of that.
Well, you got to understand, people can only grow if they think a certain way. We have never had the opportunity to think of how we can grow large. Mm-hmm. The more our kids and our grandkids, as you say, start to thinking that we can be big, we can become a corporation with good people, the more we can do it. Yeah. We can do it, but we got to educate ourselves.
And again, what's so key there is, I keep coming back to MBEs hire more minorities.
And I agree with that.
And so the wealth generation is about growing it in the owner's family, but it's also about growing it in our community, because diverse companies hire more diverse people.
But particularly in an industry like yours, where there are some specialized skill sets that you're constantly looking for. So once you get a few companies kind of in the right space, you don't want to lose that when that owner decides he no longer wants to be in that business. So you want to kind of grow a deep bench, if you will, in particularly in specialized industry spaces.
And so that's, for our final podcast, I guess that's one challenge that I would like to leave with our MBE community of listeners. Recognizing that some of you have businesses that you've just started. Some of you have businesses that are 3 years old or 5 years old and are below $5 million. Some of you have been in business a long time, and you have very strong businesses. You have businesses that are already hundreds of millions. I mean, I know there are at least 2 MBE companies that are $5 or $6 billion companies that they have been built over decades. Well, I want to thank you all so much. Thank you very much, Bill, Mark. Really enjoyed it. And so, Mark, you mentioned how you can be contacted. Bill, you want to mention how you can be reached?
Yes, they can reach me by bill.cadizcapital.com.
Cadiz, C-A-D-I-Z?
Yes.
Very good.
I think it's, no, let me change that. Bill.Ellison, E-L-L-I-S-O-N, at cadizcapital.com.
Very good. So the opportunities are here. Get connected, folks. Find your fit and get connected. And with that, we will conclude our podcasts for today. And I'd like to thank you all again for being our guests. And for all of you who are here, have a fantastic conference. For all of you that aren't here, wish you were here, maybe next year. Good night.